AirDNA's chief economist, Jamie Lane, is well known as an expert in the short-term rental industry. He's appeared on TV,
Chief economist, Jamie Lane. Jamie, this is fascinating.
on podcasts,
It doesn't surprise me that Airbnb is going different.
and on stage to share his insights for STR hosts and investors around the world. Now, he's tackling his biggest challenge yet: purchasing, setting up, and running a successful short-term rental property. Can Jamie go from STR data expert to real-life Airbnb host? This is Jamie's Lane Change. There are a lot of monetary concerns for would-be short-term rental hosts to consider, not the least of which are financing for the property and insurance. When it comes to financing, it turns out it pays to be an economist.
Being in the space, I knew there was a lot of options for us on how we were going to finance it. Whether it was going to be an investment home mortgage, whether it was going to be a second home mortgage, whether we were going to do a DSCR loan. We talked a lot about it. First, there was the down payment and sort of getting that together, and based on the option, it really determined how much of a down payment we needed to come up with. For a second home property, we could have done a 10% down payment, but then we would have had to have been using the house like half the time, which we really didn't want to commit to. And then for a DSCR loan, slightly higher rate and not financing it off of our incomes. What we found was that we could go the traditional mortgage route. We talked with a few different lenders, and they actually ended up being the lowest down payment and getting us the better rate. So we were able to go with 20% down. The interest rate, funny enough, varied so much throughout the time that we were looking. So we had sort of found a house. We were going to set the closing time, and interest rates really spiked. This was like in April of 2024. They kept wanting us to lock, and the economist in me was like, you know what? We're gonna have a CPI print on this date, and I think interest rates are gonna lower. So like, let's wait to the last possible moment. And we actually, by waiting, went from having to close at a 7.5% interest rate to getting all the way down to a 6.99, which saved us significantly in terms of the monthly payment.
Despite Jamie's economist credentials, for Alex, there was still a certain amount of stress associated with making such a large investment.
I grew up in a household where we did not have a lot of extra money, and so I'm always second guessing, like, do we have the money for that? Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? What if this happens? What if this happens? So we definitely had a lot of those conversations. I've never applied for a mortgage before. Like, I've never bought a home. Jamie owned this home when I met him, and I'd always rented before. So it was definitely my first foray into like applying for a mortgage, and I had no idea how much was involved in all the steps. And it's definitely easier because you have someone that can speak the language. Like, he'll say something to me and I'm like, okay, but say it in English. And then have him like all of the like acronyms you just said, I'm like, so that is really helpful. I'm sure with some basic research, a person could figure that out. But I just have a shortcut here.
Getting your financing figured out is a big step, but it's also important to figure out the insurance for your property. Unfortunately, it's not always easy to find somebody to insure a short-term rental, but luckily, Jamie knows somebody that specializes in insuring STRs.
So ultimately, insurance contracts are written with an intent around the coverage. So your regular homeowner's insurance is for a residence premises or primary home. And then you have a landlord policy or a second home policy, fits in that category as well. And it is meant for you to use as a residence kind of more seasonally, or to conduct long-term rentals as a residence. And then you have a commercial business insurance policy, which is a bit more broad in the definitions of what is being covered under that property and liability coverage. Now, ultimately with a short-term rental, you need factors of all three. You might use the home as a residence here and there. You might take in longer-term stays or mid-term rentals here and there. And you're definitely running a business as a short-term rental. And so you need factors of all three. The biggest gaps in coverage on the unendorsed homeowner's policy, one, it requires it has to be your primary residence, but there's business activity exclusion. And then in your landlord policies, it doesn't define long-term rentals as a business, but short-term rentals are. So in an unendorsed landlord policy, you run the risk of no coverage at all. One of the first things that sticks out to us is that there's a creek adjacent to the property. That is a liability risk. And so building the foundations around why our liability coverage is going to be a bit more robust for a situation like that, and why a commercial liability product custom built for short-term rentals is better than a homeowner's or a landlord product because of how their liability definitions worked is kind of, step number one for us. And then going through the continual building of the risk management process and building a product for, in this case, Jamie's particular risk, we look at other things like amenities. Are you going to be hosting a hot tub? Are you going to do bicycles, canoes, kayaks? What type of amenities are you going to provide? Are you going to do swing sets for children? Pet friendly, let's say. I mean, that's a growing aspect. And so we look at what the client is looking to do and then show how our particular product is going to build a much more robust package.
With financing and insurance covered, you might assume that it's easy to move forward with the purchase, but that's not always the case. Getting trapped in the analysis phase can paralyze even the savviest of investors.
Okay, Jamie, so I wanted to ask you about something that I know a lot of first-time hosts struggle with, which is analysis paralysis. How did you and Alex ultimately overcome that analysis paralysis and decide that it's time, we're ready to do this, we're going to pull the trigger?
One, and just the environment that we're in, you can't expect necessarily a grand slam investment in the conditions that we're sort of dealing with right now relatively lower revenues, higher home values, really high interest rates. We knew going in that we weren't going to have that, and the AirDNA data really helped me sort of coalesce around that. The other was on essentially evaluating what we had to have on the property to make it be a good investment.
Purchasing the property is a huge accomplishment, one that has put Jamie one step closer to becoming a real Airbnb host. In our next episode, things will get a little physical as the property gets a makeover and some added amenities. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on those notifications so that you don't miss the next installment of Jamie's Lane Change.